The village of Omugwe whispered of omens carried by the river, of blessings that turned bitter, of promises forged with spirits older than time. Beneath the towering baobab tree that marked the village's heart, the elders spoke of a prophecy. 2 lives bound by fate, their bond a blessing or a curse, depending on the choices they made. Yet few could have foreseen how deeply this prophecy would shape Omugwe, how the laughter of 2 brothers would one day give way to silence, and how envy, like a serpent, would coil itself around the roots of their love. It began on a quiet evening, as the sun painted the river golden, and the air hummed with the whispers of the spirits. Kem knelt at the riverbank, her hands trembling in prayer, unaware that the shadow watching her would change the destiny of her family and her village forever. The village of Omugwe thrived under the embrace of the mighty river that flowed through its heart. Its waters were life-giving, nourishing the fertile soil that produced lush fields of maize, cassava, and yam. The villagers revered the river as a divine blessing, believing it carried the spirit's favor. At the center of the village stood an ancient baobab tree, its roots entwined with Omugwe's history, and its branches a symbol of enduring strength. Omugwe's people lived by the rhythms of the land and the wisdom of their ancestors. They celebrated the planting of seeds, the return of the rains, and the bountiful harvests. Among them were Ekene and Ninkem, a couple deeply respected for their kindness and unwavering bond. Ekene, a skilled farmer, was known for his generous heart, while Ninkem, a healer, was sought after for her knowledge of herbs and remedies. Yet for all their blessings, one absence cast a shadow over their lives. They were childless. For 20 years their home echoed with silence where the laughter of children should have been. They bore this sorrow with quiet resilience, turning to prayer, tradition, and the hope that the spirits would one day hear their cries. As each season passed without a child, the weight of their longing grew heavier. Nkem often found herself drawn to the river, its constant flow a reminder of life's continuity. She would kneel at its edge, offering whispered prayers to the spirits, asking for a child to fill the void in her heart. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a brilliant amber, Nkem stood by the river. The golden light shimmered on the water's surface, creating ripples that seemed to dance to an unseen rhythm. She knelt on the soft earth, her hands clasped, her voice trembling with emotion. "Spirits of the river, ancestors who watch over us, hear my plea," she murmured. "Bless our home with the laughter of a child. I ask for nothing more." The air around her grew still, the usual hum of the evening insects fading into silence. A soft rustling came from the trees nearby, and Nkem turned, her breath catching in her throat. A figure stood at the edge of the riverbank, draped in a tattered robe that seemed to blend with the shadows. His face was obscured, but his presence carried an otherworldly weight. "Do not despair, daughter of Omugwe," the figure said, his voice deep and resonant, like the river itself speaking. "The spirits have heard your cries. You will bear twin sons, and they will be a blessing to your family in this village." Nkem's eyes widened, her heart pounding with equal parts fear and hope. She opened her mouth to speak, but the figure raised a hand, silencing her. "Remember this," he continued, his tone grave. "These children are born under a sacred oath. Their locks shall remain uncut, a symbol of the promise made to the spirits. Should this vow be broken, calamity will follow." As suddenly as he appeared, the figure vanished. A flash of lightning lit the sky, though no storm followed. Nkem fell to her knees, trembling, her mind racing with the weight of his words. When she returned home, she found Akine by the hearth, his face lit by the soft glow of the fire. She recounted the encounter, her voice quivering as she described the figure's prophecy. Akine listened intently, his skepticism giving way to concern as he saw the conviction in his wife's tear-filled eyes. That night, Keen said softly, "Let us pray together." And so they knelt by the hearth, their hands clasped tightly, and whispered prayers into the night. The promise-fulfilled months passed, and the village entered the season of the rains. The river swelled, its waters carrying life to the fields, and the earth thrived under its touch. Ninkem began to feel the stirrings of new life within her, a sensation that brought tears of joy to her eyes. She shared the news with Akine, who embraced her tightly, his voice thick with emotion. "Our prayers have been answered," he murmured. "The spirits have blessed us." Word of Nkem's pregnancy spread through the village like wildfire, bringing a renewed sense of hope and celebration. The women of Omugwe gathered at her home, singing songs of blessing and offering herbal teas to ease her journey. The men congratulated Ekene, their hands firm on his shoulders, their smiles wide. As her belly grew, Nkem found herself drawn more often to the river. She would sit on its banks, her hands resting on her stomach, and whisper words of gratitude to the spirits. The villagers, seeing her there, believed her child to be a divine gift. When the time came, it was at dawn, as the first rays of sunlight painted the sky in hues of gold and pink. The midwives worked tirelessly, their chants blending with Nkem's cries. As the sun broke over the horizon, twin cries filled the air, strong and insistent. The midwives laughed and wept, lifting the newborns into the light. "They are beautiful," one midwife said, her voice choked with emotion. "Truly, the spirits have blessed this family." Nkem held her sons close, tears streaming down her face. Their hair, thick and curly, was unlike any she had seen on a newborn. She remembered the figure's words and felt the weight of the promise anew. Ekene, standing nearby, looked upon his sons with awe. "Chidi," he said, pointing to the elder, whose curious eyes already searched the room. "And Deek," he added, gesturing to the younger, who rested quietly in his mother's arms. The naming ceremony was the grandest the village had ever seen. The twins were dressed in white robes, symbolizing purity, and the elder blessed them with sacred water from the river. Ekene and Nkem swore an oath before the entire village to honor the spirit's command, never allowing a blade to touch their son's hair. The village rejoiced, their voices rising in song and praise. The twins became a symbol of hope and renewal, their presence a reminder of the spirit's favor. The bond of brothers. As the twins grew, their personalities began to emerge, distinct yet complementary. Chidi, bold and curious, led their adventures through the village and its surrounding forests. His laughter was infectious, his charm undeniable. Dyke, quieter and more reflective, often followed his brother's lead, his watchful eyes absorbing the world around him. The villagers adored them, often marveling at their bond. Together, the brothers climbed trees, fished by the river, and helped in the fields. Their mother watched them with a mixture of pride and trepidation, knowing the weight of the prophecy that hung over their heads. "Chidi will be a leader," Ekene often said, his voice filled with pride. And Deek, a wise counselor by his side. Nkem, however, noticed the subtle differences in her son's interactions. Chidi's boldness often earned him praise, while Dyke's quieter nature went unnoticed. She saw the flicker of disappointment in Dyke's eyes during village gatherings, though he said nothing. A mother's intuition told her that the harmony between them might one day be tested. A fateful celebration. The test began during the Harvest Festival, a time of joy and thanksgiving in Omugwe. The air was alive with the scent of roasted maize and palm wine, and the villagers gathered near the river to celebrate. Chidi and Dyke played by the riverbank, their laughter ringing above the music and chatter. It was Chidi's quick reflexes that saved the day when a stray goat threatened the king's sacred yam garden. With a burst of speed, he captured the animal, earning cheers and admiration from the crowd. The villagers chanted his name, lifting him onto their shoulders. Dyke clapped along, but his smile faltered. He slipped away from the celebration, seeking the quiet solace of the forest's edge. There, beneath the towering trees, he wrestled with emotions he could barely name, envy, longing, and the sting of being overshadowed. As he sat in the darkness, the wind carried a faint whisper. "You are more than the shadow you cast, Dyke. Your path is yours to choose." He turned, his heart pounding, but found only the rustling leaves. The words lingered, both a comfort and a challenge, as he made his way back to the village where the celebrations continued without him. Foreshadowing the divide, Nkem watched her sons closely in the days that followed. The bond that had once been unbreakable seemed to strain under the weight of unspoken feelings. Chidi, unaware of his brother's inner turmoil, continued to shine, while Dyke grew quieter, his smiles less frequent. Ekene dismissed her concerns. "They are boys, Nkem. They will grow out of it." But Nkem knew better. The river flowed steadily, but its surface could not reveal the currents beneath. She prayed that the prophecy's shadow would not deepen the rift she sensed growing between her sons. For now, the twins' bond remained intact, their laughter still filling the air. Yet, like the gentle ripple that begins in the river's depths, the seeds of conflict had been sown, waiting for the currents of time to bring them to the surface. As the seeds of destiny are planted in Omugwe, the brothers' journey is just beginning. Will their bond endure, or will envy and fate conspire to test them? Stay tuned for part 2 to uncover how their paths diverge. If you enjoyed this part, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next chapter of this epic tale. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think lies ahead for Chidi and Deke? Your support keeps these stories alive. Recap. The spirits of the river answered Nkem's heartfelt prayers, blessing her and Akin with twin sons Chidi and Dike. Bound by a sacred promise, the boys were destined for greatness. Yet, as they grew, Chidi's boldness and charisma earned him the village's admiration, while Dike, quieter and more reflective, struggled in his shadow. Beneath their laughter, a silent rift began to form, as the seeds of envy took root in Dike's heart. Part 2. In Omugwe, envy was a whisper, a silent current beneath still waters. For Dike, it began as a fleeting thought, a momentary ache, but envy once ignored grows like a vine, winding tightly until it strangles what was once whole. As the brothers stood on the cusp of manhood, the choices they made would test their bond and the village's faith in the spirits, like never before. The bond between Chidi and Dike, though still strong, began to strain under the weight of unspoken feelings. Time passed, and the twins grew into adolescence, their personalities sharpening like stones smoothed by the river's flow. Chidi's boldness blossomed into leadership, earning him admiration and trust among the villagers. He was the first to volunteer for a hunt, the first to defend the younger children when they were in trouble. His name was spoken with pride, often in stories told around the village fires. Dike, however, found himself increasingly cast in his brother's shadow. His reflective nature, once seen as thoughtful, was now often overlooked. He became the quieter twin, the one who followed rather than led. Though he loved Chidi, a quiet resentment began to grow within him, an envy he could not name, but one that gnawed at the edges of his heart. One sweltering afternoon, a test of courage came upon the twins. Ekinin, working in the yard, noticed a rustling in the bushes near the goat pen. He paused, his hands tightening around the wooden hoe. From the shadows slithered a venomous snake, its emerald body coiled and ready to strike. Ekin froze, his voice caught in his throat as the snake's unblinking eyes fixed on him. Before he could call for help, Chidi appeared, his steps quick and purposeful. Seizing a sturdy branch, he moved with the precision of a seasoned hunter. In one fluid motion, he brought the branch down on the snake's head, killing it instantly. Akini exhaled in relief, his chest heaving as he embraced his son. The villagers soon gathered to hear the tale, their voices raised in celebration of Chidi's bravery. That night, they held a feast in his honor, the air filled with the sound of drums and laughter. Chidi was showered with praise, his name chanted as the hero of Omugwe. Dike sat on the fringes of the gathering, his hands folded tightly in his lap. He clapped when the others clapped, smiled when the others smiled, but his heart churned with envy. The firelight reflected in his stormy eyes as he watched Chidi bask in the villagers' adoration. That night he slipped away into the shadows, seeking the solitude of the forest. Beneath the ancient baobab tree he sank to his knees, his fists digging into the earth. The silence of the forest pressed against him, and tears streamed down his face. "Why not me?" he whispered to the night. "Why must I always stand in his shadow?" The wind stirred the leaves above him, carrying a familiar whisper. "You are more than the shadow you cast, Dike. Your path is yours to choose." This time, Dike did not look around. He closed his eyes, letting the words sink into the depths of his soul. He wanted to believe them, yet the bitterness inside him remained, a current too strong to resist. Years passed, and the twins became young men. Chidi continued to rise in prominence, his confidence and skill earning him the respect of all. Dike, meanwhile, withdrew further into himself, his quiet resentment hardening into resolve. He yearned to step out of his brother's shadow, to prove himself as more than Chidi's twin. One evening he approached Ekene as the family sat around the hearth. The flames danced in his dark eyes, and his voice was steady but charged with emotion. "Father," he said, "I want my hair cut." The room fell silent. Nkem, who had been tending the stew, froze mid-motion. Ekene looked up, his expression a mix of shock and disbelief. "Why would you ask such a thing, Dyke? You know the vow we made to the spirits." "I do," Dyke replied, his tone unyielding. "But this hair binds me to a destiny that is not my own. I will never be like Chidi. I want to choose my path." Nkem's voice trembled as she spoke. "Dyke, the spirits warned us. Cutting your hair could bring calamity to us all." Dyke's jaw tightened and he turned to his father. "I am not asking, Father. I am telling you. I will cut my hair with or without your blessing." Ikene's shoulders sagged under the weight of the decision. He loved his son deeply and saw the pain behind his defiance. With a heavy heart, he retrieved the sacred blade kept hidden since the twins' birth. That night, beneath the pale light of a full moon, he severed Dyke's locks. Each cut seemed to echo in the still night air, a sound that carried both sorrow and foreboding. As the final strand fell to the ground, a chill swept through the village. The goats stirred uneasily in their pens, and a distant howl pierced the night. Nkem clutched her shawl tightly, a sense of unease settling in her chest. Though the night was warm, she shivered. The curse unfolds. In the days that followed, strange occurrences began to plague Omugwe. Goats disappeared from their pens, their fates a mystery. The river, once clear and life-giving, grew murky and sluggish. The crops, despite the rains, began to wilt, their leaves curling as if recoiling from an unseen force. The villagers whispered of a curse, their voices hushed and fearful. Then came the lion. The beast was unlike anything the villagers had ever seen. Larger than any lion known in the region, its mane black as midnight, and its eyes burning with an unnatural fire. Its roars shook the trees, sending shivers down the spines of all who heard it. No hunter dared venture into the forest, for the creature seemed to be a force of nature, immune to ordinary weapons. The villagers turned to King Okeki, their ruler, for guidance. The king, a man of wisdom and courage, addressed his people with solemn authority. "This beast threatens us all," he declared. "Whoever slays it will be rewarded with a portion of the kingdom and the hand of my daughter, Princess Adayaze, in marriage." The proclamation stirred excitement among the young men of the village, but none dared step forward. All eyes turned to Chidi, whose reputation as a fearless hunter gave the villagers hope. Though he had no interest in wealth or power, Chidi felt the weight of their expectations. "I will face the lion," he said, his voice steady, "for the sake of Omugwe." The path of betrayal. As Chidi prepared for the hunt, Dyke watched him from the shadows, his emotions a storm of envy and guilt. He saw in his brother's actions a reflection of his own inadequacies, and the bitterness within him deepened. But envy soon gave way to a darker ambition. One night, under the cover of darkness, Dyke ventured to the edge of the forest, where the outcasts of Omugwe lived, men and women who had been banished for crimes against the village. They were a ruthless group, known for their cunning and treachery. Dyke approached them with a proposition. "I want my brother captured," he said, his voice cold. "In exchange, I will ensure you are rewarded with wealth and supplies." The outcasts, intrigued by the prospect of both gain and vengeance against the village that had cast them out, agreed. They set their trap, lying in wait for Chidi to enter the cursed forest. On the night of the hunt, Chidi and Dyke ventured into the woods together. Though their relationship had grown strained, Chidi's trust in his brother remained intact. "We face this lion as we have always faced challenges together," he said, clasping Dyke's shoulder. Dyke forced a smile, but his heart was heavy. The shadows of the forest seemed to press closer as they moved deeper into its depths. The air grew colder, the trees gnarled and twisted, their branches clawing at the sky. The lion's roar shattered the silence, and Chidi readied his spear. But before he could act, the outcasts emerged from the darkness, their weapons drawn. Chidi fought valiantly, but he was outnumbered. They overpowered him, binding his hands with rough ropes. As they dragged Chidi away, he looked back at his brother, confusion and betrayal etched on his face. "Why, Dyke?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "Why would you do this?" Dyke said nothing, his gaze fixed on the ground. The weight of his betrayal pressed down on him, but he convinced himself it was necessary. His path to freedom, his chance to escape the shadow of his brother. With envy taking root and the spirit's warning looming, the brothers' bond hangs by a thread. What will Dyke's choices mean for his family, his village, and himself? The twists are only just beginning, so don't miss part 3, The Consequences of Betrayal. If this story has you hooked, show your love by liking this video, sharing it with someone who needs a powerful tale of family and destiny, and subscribing to our channel. Click the bell icon so you're the first to know when the next chapter drops. And in the comments, tell us, what would you do if you were in Dyke's shoes? Recap. What begins as quiet envy blossoms into action. Dyke's desire to escape his brother's shadow drives him to sever his sacred locks, breaking the spirit's promise and unleashing a curse upon Omugwe. The river darkens, crops wither, and a monstrous lion stalks the forest. When Chidi takes up the challenge to save the village, Dyke's envy leads him to betrayal, and Chidi is captured by outcasts. As one twin rises in the village's eyes, the other suffers in silence, their bond shattered. Part 3. Betrayal is a blade that cuts both ways. For Chidi it meant chains and captivity. For Dyke it was the weight of guilt growing heavier with each passing day. But in Omugwe the spirits watched, their judgment patient but certain. As darkness descended upon the village, the brothers' fractured bond became the key to either redemption or ruin. The night after Chidi was taken, the village of Omugwe was eerily silent. The forest, once alive with the hum of cicadas and the rustle of leaves, seemed to hold its breath. The river's murky flow carried whispers of unease, as if it knew the balance of Omugwe had been irrevocably disturbed. Dyke returned from the forest alone, his face pale and drawn. When questioned by the villagers, he claimed the lion had attacked, that Chidi had bravely confronted it and had not returned. His voice faltered, but the villagers, overwhelmed with grief and fear, accepted his account. Nkem collapsed at the news, her cries piercing the stillness of the night. "My son!" she wailed, clutching at the earth outside her hut. "Chidi, my brave boy." Akine held her, his own tears streaming silently down his face. They buried their faces in their hands, mourning a son they believed lost forever. The villagers held a solemn vigil for Chidi, gathering around the ancient baobab tree to light torches and sing songs of remembrance. They spoke of his bravery, his selflessness, his unwavering love for Omugwe. Yet, in the flickering firelight, Dyke stood apart, his head bowed, his fists clenched at his sides. The guilt was suffocating. Every glance from his parents, every whispered word from the villagers, felt like an accusation. Yet Dyke told himself that he had no choice, that Chidi's shadow was too large, that his betrayal was necessary to carve his own identity. But the weight of his lie grew heavier with each passing day. The rise of Dyke. In Chidi's absence, the village turned to Dyke. Though he lacked his brother's charisma, he stepped into the role with a quiet determination. He led hunting parties, organized defenses against the lion that still haunted the outskirts, and gained the trust of King Okeke. The king, impressed by Dyke's apparent resilience, summoned him to the palace. "You have shown great strength in these trying times," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a ruler. "Omugwe needs leaders like you. From this day forward, you shall serve as chief protector." The title came with privileges, a seat at the king's council, fine robes, and the respect of the villagers. Yet each accolade felt hollow to Dyke, his accomplishments tainted by the memory of Chidi's betrayed gaze. The villagers praised him, but their words carried an unspoken question: why did you return when Chidi did not? Despite his rising status, Dyke found himself growing more isolated. He avoided the village square, where whispers of his brother lingered like ghosts. He turned his focus inward, burying himself in his duties, hoping that his actions would drown out his guilt. Chidi's captivity. Far from Omugwe, deep within the cursed forest, Chidi was alive. The outcasts who had captured him were a ruthless band of exiles, cast out of their own villages for crimes ranging from theft to murder. They operated on the fringes of society, surviving by raiding settlements and ambushing travelers. Bound and beaten, Chidi was dragged to their hidden camp, a cluster of crude shelters hidden among the dense trees. The leader of the outcasts, a scarred man named Oba, looked at Chidi with disdain. "This is the great hunter of Omugwe," Oba sneered, circling Chidi like a predator. "Hardly seems worth the effort." Despite the pain and humiliation, Chidi held his head high. His body was battered, but his spirit remained unbroken. He refused to let the outcasts see his fear. Days turned into weeks, and Chidi endured the harsh conditions of captivity. He was forced to labor for the outcasts, fetching water, chopping wood, and enduring their taunts. Yet even in the darkest moments, the voice of the spirits whispered to him. "Your journey is not over," the voice said, steady and calm. "Endure, for your destiny lies beyond this trial." Chidi clung to those words, drawing strength from them. He observed his captors closely, learning their routines, their weaknesses. He listened to their conversations, piecing together their plans. In his heart, he knew that escape was his only option. The strain on Omugwe. Back in Omugwe, the effects of the curse continued to spread. The lion's roars echoed through the forest at night, sending chills down the spines of the villagers. Crops failed despite the rains, and livestock disappeared without a trace. The river, once the village's lifeblood, grew more polluted, its once crystal waters now dark and sluggish. The villagers began to lose hope. They turned to the elders seeking answers, but the wisdom of the ancestors seemed elusive. Some whispered that the curse had been brought upon them by Chidi's death, that the spirits were angered by his loss. Nkem, however, could not shake the feeling that her son was still alive. She dreamed of him often, seeing his face, hearing his voice. "He is out there," she told Akin one night, her voice trembling with conviction. "I know it." Akin sighed, his face etched with worry. "Even if he is Nkem, what can we do? The forest is cursed. The lion still roams. We are powerless against the spirit's will." But Nkem refused to give up. She began to leave offerings by the riverbank, bowls of fruit, coins, and herbs, praying for Chidi's safe return. Her faith was unshakable, even as the village descended further into despair. Dyke's dealings. Dyke, too, was haunted by Chidi's absence. He found no solace in his new position, the title of chief protector, a constant reminder of the brother he had betrayed. Each time he stood in the palace, each time he spoke to the king, he felt the weight of his lie pressing down on him. In secret, he continued to deal with the outcasts. He met them at the forest's edge under cover of darkness, bringing them supplies in exchange for their silence. But his dealings were not without risk. The outcasts grew bolder, demanding more each time, threatening to reveal the truth if Dyke did not comply. "They know," Dyke whispered to himself one night, pacing in his hut. "The spirits know. The village will know." The fear of exposure drove him to paranoia. He began to see shadows where there were none, to hear whispers in the wind that spoke his name. The once confident young man was now a shell of himself, his ambition poisoned by guilt. The stranger's revelation. One fateful night, as Dyke sat alone in his hut, a knock came at the door. He opened it to find a tall, hooded stranger standing in the moonlight. The man's face was partially obscured, but his eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity. "Who are you?" Dyke demanded, gripping the doorframe. The stranger stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "I bring news from the north. Your brother is alive." Dyke's heart stopped. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. "Alive?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The stranger nodded. "He is held captive by the outcasts who dwell beyond the river. I can lead you to him, but you must come alone." Dyke's mind raced. If Chidi was alive, everything he had built, his position, his power, his fragile trust, was at risk. Yet, a part of him felt an overwhelming relief at the news. The guilt he had carried for so long now had a chance to be confronted. "I will go," he said finally, his voice trembling. "Take me to him." Fate has dealt its hand, and the brothers are now on opposite paths. But the spirits are watching, and redemption may yet be possible. Can the bond of blood be restored? Find out in Part 4, Redemption and Legacy. If you've been captivated by this tale, give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a chapter of this incredible journey. Let us know in the comments. Will Dyke find redemption, or is it too late for forgiveness? Recap. Chidi endured years of captivity, drawing strength from the spirit's whispers of hope. Meanwhile, Dyke rose to prominence in Omugwe, but his new position was poisoned by guilt and paranoia. When a stranger revealed that Chidi was alive, Dyke ventured into the cursed forest to confront his past. The spirits, intervening in their conflict, freed Chidi and offered the brothers a second chance. In a ritual beneath the baobab tree, the village witnessed their bond restored and the curse lifted. Part 4. Redemption is never freely given. It must be earned. For Chidi and Dyke, the path to healing had only just begun. The village, though relieved of its curse, remained divided, the scars of the past slow to heal. As the brothers worked together to rebuild Omugwe, a lingering question loomed. Could the bond that once broke under the weight of envy endure the trials yet to come? The next morning, Dyke stood at the edge of Omugwe, waiting for the stranger under the soft light of dawn. The village remained cloaked in its uneasy silence, the curses of the forest and river casting a shadow over its people. His heart was heavy, the weight of his decisions threatening to crush him, but he knew he could not turn back. The stranger arrived, stepping silently from the trees. Without a word, he motioned for Dyke to follow. Together, they slipped into the forest, its gnarled trees and dense undergrowth swallowing them whole. The journey into the cursed forest. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew colder, the shadows thicker. The lion's roar echoed faintly in the distance, a low rumble that made Dyke's blood run cold. The stranger moved with an unsettling ease, as if he belonged to the cursed woods. Dyke followed, his spear clutched tightly in his hand, his thoughts a storm of fear and anticipation. At last, they reached a clearing where the outcasts' camp lay hidden among the trees. Rough shelters made of branches and hides surrounded a central fire, its flames casting flickering shadows on the forest floor. At the heart of the camp, bound to a post, was Chidi. Dyke's breath caught in his throat. His brother was thinner than he remembered, his once bright eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Yet there was a resilience in Chidi's posture, a strength that defied the chains that bound him. The outcasts noticed their approach and rose to greet Dyke, their expressions a mixture of suspicion and amusement. Oba, the scarred leader, stepped forward, his gaze sharp. "You've returned, Dyke?" Oba said, his voice dripping with mockery. "What brings you back to our little corner of the world?" Dyke hesitated, his grip tightening on his spear. He felt the weight of Chidi's gaze, the unspoken questions in his brother's eyes. Summoning his courage, he spoke. "I've come to free him," Dyke said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Oba laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Free him? After all we've done for you? Do you think we'll just let him go?" Dyke glanced at Chidi, whose expression was unreadable. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said. "Name your price." The outcasts exchanged glances, their smiles cruel. Oba stepped closer, his scarred face inches from Dyke's. "Your life," he said simply. "Trade your freedom for his." Dyke froze. The words hit him like a blow, stripping away the last vestiges of his resolve. He had come here believing he could outwit the outcasts, that he could negotiate Chidi's release without sacrificing himself. Now, faced with the reality of his choices, he faltered. "Brother," Chidi's voice broke through the silence, calm and steady despite the tension in the air. "You don't have to do this." Dyke turned to him, his vision blurred by tears. "Yes, I do," he said. "I've wronged you, Chidi. I've wronged this village. If this is the price of redemption, then so be it." The spirits intervene. As Dyke stepped forward, ready to surrender himself, the air around them shifted. A sudden wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing the fire and plunging the camp into darkness. The outcasts froze, their eyes wide with fear, as an eerie light began to glow from the forest. A voice echoed through the trees, low and resonant, carrying the weight of centuries. "The time of reckoning has come. The bond of blood cannot be severed, no matter how deep the wound. Redemption lies in unity, not sacrifice." The outcasts screamed as the wind grew stronger, scattering their makeshift shelters and sending them fleeing into the forest. Oba stumbled back, his confidence shattered, before vanishing into the shadows. Only Dyke and Chidi remained, the glow from the forest illuminating their faces. The chains that bound Chidi shattered, falling to the ground with a metallic clang. He stumbled forward, and Dyke caught him, holding him up. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. "Thank you." Chidi said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, Dyke replied, his voice breaking, for everything. The eerie glow began to fade, and the forest returned to its quiet stillness. The brothers turned toward Omugwe, their steps slow and deliberate, as if each one carried the weight of the past. The return to Omugwe. When they emerged from the forest, the sun was setting, casting the village in a warm golden light. The villagers, seeing the figures approach, gasped in disbelief. Whispers spread like wildfire. Chidi is alive! Nkem, standing near the riverbank, dropped her basket and ran toward her sons, tears streaming down her face. She threw her arms around Chidi, holding him tightly, her sobs muffled against his shoulder. Ekene followed, his eyes brimming with emotion, his voice thick as he murmured, My son. The reunion was bittersweet. While the villagers celebrated Chidi's return, their eyes turned to Dyke with suspicion and unease. Though they knew nothing of his betrayal, they sensed the tension between the brothers. The elders convened that evening under the baobab tree, summoning Chidi and Dyke to speak before the village. King Okike sat at the center, his expression grave. Chidi, the king began, his voice steady. You have returned to us, but your absence has left questions unanswered. We must know the truth. Chidi stood tall, his voice calm as he recounted the events of his capture. He spoke of the outcasts, the betrayal that led him to their camp, and his eventual escape. But he did not name Dyke as the betrayer. Instead, he spoke of forgiveness, his words carrying the weight of his journey. My brother has made mistakes, Chidi said, his gaze steady. But I do not stand here to condemn him. I stand here to seek unity, for our bond is stronger than the darkness that sought to divide us. Dyke, overcome with emotion, stepped forward. His voice trembled as he confessed his role in Chidi's capture, his guilt laid bare before the village. I betrayed my brother out of envy, Dyke said, his eyes cast downward. I thought I could find freedom by stepping out of his shadow, but I was wrong. I have only brought pain to him and to this village. The crowd murmured, their shock palpable. King Okeke raised a hand for silence, his expression unreadable. The truth has been spoken, the king said, but it is not for me to decide the fate of these brothers. It is for the spirits and the people of Omugwe. The ritual of redemption. The elders proposed a ritual, a ceremony to cleanse the past and seek the spirit's guidance. At dawn, the village gathered beneath the baobab tree, its ancient roots entwined with the soil of their ancestors. The air was heavy with anticipation as the brothers knelt before the elders. The village elder stepped forward, holding the ceremonial blade. This blade, he said, severed the locks that carried the spirit's promise. Today, it will mark a new beginning. Chidi took the blade first, cutting a single lock of Dyke's regrown hair. The strands fell to the earth, a symbol of the burden they shared. Dyke then took the blade, cutting a lock of Chidi's hair in return. The gesture, though small, carried profound meaning. Their bond, once fractured, was now whole. A sudden breeze swept through the clearing, rustling the leaves of the baobab. The villagers felt its presence, a quiet reassurance that the spirits had accepted the offering. The elder placed his hands on the brothers' shoulders. The bond of blood is unbroken, he said. From this day forward, let there be no division among you. A new era. With the ritual complete, the village of Omugwe began to heal. The river's waters cleared, the crops flourished, and the lion's roars were heard no more. Chidi and Dyke, now united, worked together to rebuild what had been lost. They repaired irrigation channels, replanted fields, and strengthened the village's defenses. Chidi, driven by a desire to share his story, sought permission from King Okeke to leave the village. There are others who need to hear what we have learned, he said. The king granted his blessing, and Chidi set out as a wanderer and teacher, spreading the wisdom of forgiveness and resilience. Dyke remained in Omugwe, his leadership tempered by humility. He worked tirelessly to earn the trust of his people, his actions a testament to his transformation. Though some villagers were slow to forgive, Dyke accepted their hesitation, knowing that true redemption took time. The legacy of the brothers years later, Chidi returned to Omugwe, his hair silver, his face lined with the marks of a life well lived. The village had flourished under Dyke's rule, its people united and prosperous. The brothers stood together once more beneath the baobab tree, their bond stronger than ever. Their story became legend, a tale of envy, betrayal, and redemption passed down through generations. The baobab tree, a silent witness to their trials and triumphs, stood tall, its roots deep and unyielding, its branches reaching toward the heavens. And so the village of Omugwe, once fractured by darkness, found its light through the unbreakable bond of two brothers. The brothers have taken their first steps toward healing, but the forest has not revealed all its secrets. The final battle looms, and Omugwe's fate hangs in the balance. Stay with us for the climactic Part 5, The Final Reckoning. If you've enjoyed this chapter of the story, please like this video, share it with others who love a tale of redemption and courage, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you're the first to witness the epic conclusion. What do you think? Will the brothers overcome their final test? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Recap. Chidi and Dyke began the long road to redemption, their bond strengthened by their shared trials. Together, they faced the challenges of rebuilding Omugwe, earning the trust of the villagers, and restoring balance to their home. Yet, peace is never permanent, and the lion's roar returned, echoing through the forest as a reminder of the village's unresolved fears. Once again, the brothers took up their spears, determined to protect what they had rebuilt. Part 5. In the heart of the cursed forest, the brothers stood side by side, their unity tested one final time. The lion's eyes burned with ancient fury, and its roar carried the weight of their deepest fears. But this battle was more than a fight against a beast. It was a reckoning with the past, a chance to prove that redemption, though hard-won, was stronger than the shadow of betrayal. The village of Omugwe had settled into a cautious peace. With the return of Chidi and the ritual beneath the baobab tree, the curses that had plagued the village began to fade. The river ran clear again, its gentle flow reflecting the renewed harmony among the people. Crops flourished, livestock thrived, and laughter returned to the village square. Yet, beneath the surface, old wounds lingered. While many villagers embraced the tale of the brothers' reconciliation, others struggled to fully accept Dyke's redemption. Whispers persisted in the quiet corners of Omugwe, murmurs that questioned whether the younger twin had truly atoned for his betrayal. Dyke, now co-leader of the village alongside Chidi, bore the burden of these doubts in silence. Each day he worked tirelessly to rebuild the trust he had shattered. He led with humility, often taking on the most difficult tasks himself. Yet, in his heart, he feared that his past mistakes would forever define him. The return of darkness. One stormy night, as rain lashed the thatched roofs of the village, a sound shattered the peace. A roar, deep and menacing, echoed through the forest. It was the lion. The villagers froze, their faces pale with fear. The cursed beast, thought to have vanished, had returned. Its roar carried with it the weight of old terrors, a reminder that the past was not so easily silenced. Dyke, hearing the commotion, grabbed his spear and rushed to the edge of the forest. The villagers gathered behind him, their eyes filled with desperation. "We cannot face it again," one elder whispered, "not after what it brought upon us before." Dyke turned to the crowd, his expression resolute. "This time, we will not let fear consume us. I will face the lion." The villagers exchanged uncertain glances, but they did not protest. Chidi stepped forward, his face calm but determined. "You will not face it alone, brother," he said. "We do this together." For a moment, Dyke hesitated. He had always been the shadow to Chidi's light, the follower to his brother's leader. But now, standing shoulder to shoulder with Chidi, he felt the stirrings of a strength he had long doubted. "Together," Dyke agreed. The battle with the lion. The brothers ventured into the forest, their spears in hand. The rain had eased, but the air remained heavy with tension. The forest seemed alive with whispers, the trees swaying as if sharing secrets of the past. The lion's roars grew louder, guiding them deeper into the cursed woods. At last, they entered a clearing. There, under the eerie glow of the moon, stood the beast. Its massive frame was cloaked in shadows, its fiery eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It was larger than any lion they had ever seen, its mane dark as midnight and its claws glinting like obsidian. The brothers exchanged a glance, unspoken words passing between them. They moved as one, their movements instinctive and synchronized, a testament to the bond that had endured despite all that had come between them. The lion lunged, its roar shaking the earth. Chidi met its charge head-on, his spear aimed at its heart. The beast dodged with an unnatural agility, swiping at Chidi with its massive paw. He rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the blow. Dyke circled behind the lion, his spear steady. He struck, the tip grazing the beast's flank. The lion roared in fury, turning its attention to him. Dyke's heart pounded, but he stood his ground. He knew this was his moment, not to prove himself to the village, but to himself. The battle raged on, each brother working to outmaneuver the lion. Their spears struck in unison, each blow weakening the beast. Finally, with a coordinated effort, they brought it to its knees. Chidi delivered the final strike, driving his spear into the lion's heart. The beast let out a mournful roar before collapsing to the ground. For a moment, the forest was silent. Then, the lion's body shimmered, its form dissolving into a golden mist. The mist swirled around the brothers before rising into the sky, disappearing among the stars. The wind carried a whisper. The bond is restored. The curse is lifted. A village united, the brothers returned to Omugwe at dawn, their steps weary but triumphant. The villagers, seeing their arrival, erupted into cheers. The sight of the twins standing side by side, their spears bloodied but their faces alight with determination, brought hope to the hearts of the people. King Okeke summoned the brothers to the palace that evening. "You have done what many thought impossible," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You have faced the darkness and emerged victorious. You have restored balance to Omugwe." The elders, too, praised the twins, their skepticism finally put to rest. "Let this day be remembered," one elder proclaimed, "as the day the brothers of Omugwe brought peace to our land." Dyke, overwhelmed by the villagers' acceptance, felt tears sting his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt truly free, not just from the shadow of his brother, but from the chains of his own guilt. The legacy of the baobab. As the years passed, Chidi and Deke worked together to guide Omugwe into a new era. The village thrived under their leadership, its people united by the lessons of forgiveness and resilience. The baobab tree, where the brothers had made their vow, became a symbol of their bond and the strength of the community. Chidi, ever restless, continued to journey beyond Omugwe, sharing the story of the brothers with other villages. He spoke of the power of unity, the dangers of envy, and the enduring strength of family. His name became known far and wide, his wisdom a beacon for those seeking peace. Dyke remained in Omugwe, dedicating himself to its people. He became a leader not through ambition, but through service. The villagers came to see him as a man transformed, a symbol of redemption. The final farewell. Decades later, when both brothers had grown old, they stood together beneath the baobab tree one last time. The tree's gnarled branches stretched toward the sky, its roots deeply entwined with the soil of Omugwe. The village had flourished under their care, and its people now told the story of the brothers as a legend. "It's strange," Dyke said, his voice thick with emotion, "to think of how far we've come." Chidi smiled, his eyes twinkling with the wisdom of a life well lived. "It's not strange at all. This was our path, brother. It always has been." The brothers embraced, their bond unbroken by time or trials. As the sun set over Omugwe, casting a warm glow over the land, they turned toward the horizon, walking side by side into the light. The baobab tree swayed gently in the breeze, its roots holding the memories of their journey. For generations to come, the people of Omugwe would gather beneath its branches to share the story of the twins who had faced darkness and found the light. The bond of the brothers has faced its ultimate test, and Omugwe has emerged stronger than ever. This tale of betrayal, redemption, and unity has come to an end, but many more stories await. If you've loved this journey, like this video, share it with everyone who needs a reminder of the power of forgiveness, and make sure you're subscribed for more epic tales. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And let us know in the comments, what lessons did you take away from the story of Chidi and Dyke? Thank you for being part of this adventure.